Hello, I'm Orestria, a goth girl living in Japan. Welcome to my summer anime seasonal impressions for 2021. And my overall impression this year is pretty meh. There just isn't a lot to recommend this time around. If you're new here, we always separate things into three categories: nope, fine, and recommend. And there are a lot of shows in the fine category that could be well worth a watch if it's particularly up your alley. So don't count them out. First up is the nope categories, shows that, in my opinion, are not worth your time. The first one is Mahoka Koukou no Yutose, or Honor Student at Magic High School. This is a spin-off of Irregular at Magic High School, which is unfortunate because I didn't realize that. I haven't enjoyed my experiences with Irregular at Magic High School. It has a bunch of spin-offs, so I wouldn't have watched this if I'd realized it was one of those. It's not my fault. Magic High School is not enough to tell me that you're part of a series in anime. That's like every other anime. This show was not tagged as ecchi on any chart, and yet, within the first 2 minutes of the show, we have a pervy, nude shot of the main girl, who is also the main character. And in the first 5 minutes, she spends more time undressed than dressed. So let's talk about framing. Because I don't have a problem with nudity, I have the problem with the way it's being framed. You could have two identical shots of a woman lying naked on a medical gurney, but the framing makes one of these shots sexualized and one of them not. The shot we get in this show, the camera is lovingly in close, flowing up her body, lingering on the parts that you think it would linger on. Now, I didn't watch enough of the show to see if there's a good reason for her to be naked on this gurney, but if there is, another way of showing this without saying, hey, think about doing sexual things with this character, is to have that same scene, but to have the camera pulled back like a neutral observer. I'm not against sex or sexuality or nudity in shows, but this character is not active in this scene. If the character was trying to be alluring and stripping off her clothes, saying, hey, I want to have sex with you, then she's active, she's involved. This is the anime director showing you tits because they know that people like to see tits in anime. It's a trope. It doesn't relate to the show in any meaningful way. From what I saw of the show, this character is the point of view character. We need to emotionally attach to her, to understand her feelings, to see her moving through the world, and you're presenting her not as a character for us to empathize with, but as a sexual object for us to take gratification from. That said, I'm okay with not getting into this particular woman's mindset, given that she spends all her time pining over her older brother. Meanwhile, Uramichi Onisan is not about an older brother. It's using Onisan in this Japanese mode of address where you would call him a young man you're not overly familiar with older brother. I've actually had people in Japan call me older sister because I'm a young woman that they're not that familiar with. This show is about a children's entertainer who is soul-crushingly dead inside, which, as a preschool teacher, this is an absolute goldmine. This is a great idea. There's so much humor in the contrast between things we say and things we do, or like saying something sarcastically but the kids don't understand what sarcasm is. But in this show, it was just the one joke inartfully delivered over and over again. He was just standing there on set, at his job, with cameras on him, saying terrible shit to the kids. And it wasn't funny. And you're like, how is he not getting fired? Maybe they were going for some like mental break situation where he's not actually saying the horrible stuff out loud, but he's imagining it, except the other characters are reacting to it. It didn't work for me at all. It was not funny. It was hard to sit through. Just a shame. Shinigami Bouchan to Kuro Maid is a show with a young master, like a young lord, who is a Shinigami, so a god of death, and their maid. And it's a romance show between a young boy and his maid, who he has power over. I don't get it. And then I thought the character designs were ugly when I was just looking at the poster before I realized that it was CG. And usually you use the CG in an action show because it's easier to make the action scenes. It's cheaper that way. Oh my god, why would you use it here? I actually just shouldn't have watched this. It was really wooden and stilted and just unwatchable. I also barely watched any of the next show, Kanojo mo Kanojo. I only got like 4 minutes in. The characters are just at a 10 the whole time. They're just yelling and flipping out at each other, but they're not even angry. They're yelling things like, I love you, you're embarrassing me, God, why are you like this, I'll do whatever you want, just the whole time. And then here's the funny part. Mother's Basement recommended it in his Trash Fire video, and I was like, wait, there was a show where I can pretend it's bisexual polyamory that I didn't watch? Why didn't I watch it? And I went back to try to watch it, only to realize I had already watched it, and I still couldn't get past 4 minutes in. I was avoiding Nighthead 2041 because of the obvious CG character models on the poster, but actually the CG wasn't my main problem here. The CG was fine. This show takes place in a world where any mention of non-real things is a crime. No religion, no ghosts, no fictional characters. We follow 2 pairs of brothers, one working for the government agency that cracks down on these thought crimes, and the other pair have been locked up in a lab so long that they missed World War III, despite looking very young, and they definitely have psychic powers, a thing which should not be real in this world. This setup wasn't the worst. The show was really exposition heavy, but I was still hanging in there. And then we got to the bar scene. The psychic brothers arrive at a bar, and from the initial framing of the scene, I was able to determine everything that was going to happen in that scene. It's the classic, there's a loudmouth guy, and they get in a fight, and then they use his psychic powers, and they have to run away, and there was just no surprises, no twists, and it was done in a really boring, plodding way where, the pacing was really slow. It was so painful and predictable that I didn't want to finish watching the episode. Next, we have a fantasy show with a female protagonist not taking place in a school. It's Peach Boy Riverside. And I still didn't manage to watch a whole episode. God damn it. I spent the first half of the episode wondering why it wasn't connecting me. Sure, I really didn't like the demi-humans design, but there weren't any problems with the plot, the pacing, or the animation. That first half, aside from some racism, was really light and cutesy. In the second half, some demon antagonists show up, and it gets really tonal as, suddenly it turns into just blood fountains and people getting torn apart. No, I quit this show because it assaulted my eyes with a scene where the main character goes to the market and sees an octopus. The octopus brings back a traumatic memory of being sexually assaulted by tentacles. And the show is using this to titillate. This is clearly a traumatic memory for her, but it is displayed to us exactly the same way you would expect to see it in tentacle porn. Fuck off. This next show wins the coveted prize for most ridiculous name of the season, D-Side Tromare the Animation. That's right, D_side Tromare the Animation. This is a show where teens get sucked into a dream world where people's negative emotions turn into monsters and they have to fight them using their superpowers. Whee! Hilariously stock plot aside, I found this really frustrating to watch. This is another CG show, and the interesting part is, parts of this show were gorgeous. The problem is, it would go back and forth between being gorgeous and being painful in my eyes. And I think the roller coaster, good, bad, is actually worse than just having a consistent level of meh. Also, their CG character designs seemed borderline incapable of emoting unless they went full Looney Tunes. The plot is pretty standard, but that doesn't mean it's without potential. But here, there's just a million flashbacks in the first episode, and way too many characters. And all of the characters are being dumb enough to make me hate it. To the main character, I ask, how many times do you have to be told you're in danger while being literally chased by monsters for you to move your ass and stop asking what's happening? To the other characters, I must ask, how many times does the main character have to tell you he doesn't know what's going on for you to stop being shocked by him not understanding what's going on? And maybe explain it to him. I did appreciate his kickboxer superhero transformation being very Magical Girl-esque, though. Up next, welcome to Infodump the Show, aka Scarlet Nexus, the show where absolutely nothing happened for the first 15 minutes. This is a show about a guard force in a cyberpunkish world where monsters very occasionally attack, and nothing happens. Okay, I guess doing a terrible job of introducing way too many characters is technically something. They literally had, news reporting drones following around the guard characters and footage of them being displayed on, the kind of screens where you would usually have advertising in a city, and the populace, fangirling over the guards like they're, some kind of idols or something. It was kind of weird in a creepy surveillance way, and I don't think they were doing it to try to use that as a theme, but just as a way to introduce a pile of characters. This is actually a game, and I have it on my Steam wishlist, but I haven't played it yet. And one of the features of the game is that you can choose to be either the male protagonist or the female protagonist, and they both have a story. So of course the anime chose the male protagonist because that is the most standard way of doing things. Just overall, it feels like you can tell they're struggling to adapt the material. And even the fight scenes weren't any good. My favorite part of the whole show was the, Freudian psychosexual monster designs where they're, made of mannequin pieces, or it's, a flower bouquet, but, its vase is, a corset. This is not the best picture, and I could not get a screen cap of it from the show to save my life. This is from the actual game, which looks better than the anime. Just play the game. For a change, we have a show where I enjoyed the first episode, Tantei wa mou shindeiru, or The Detective is Already Dead. I have no idea how to properly explain this experience. The first episode was actually a double episode, but it was really just 2 episodes. The first episode I really liked. We had this female detective protagonist. We were in an airplane with this situation happening. She's just a total badass. She Watsonifies our main character on the spot, seemingly for her own amusement or edification. And it was a lot of fun. The second episode had a very different vibe, where it was more like a high school rom-com situation, but it was still the same girl and the same guy, and it was taking place in the same world. It was just taking place after the airplane incident. And I didn't like it as much, but I still did like it quite a lot. There really was a lot of chemistry between the guy and the girl, and I was getting into that, except the title kept echoing in my head. The detective is already dead. The next episode shows a whole bunch of flashbacks to all of the adventures that the detective and the main character had before the detective died, and the main character dealing with the detective's death. He was always kind of a Watson, just there because he had a natural trouble magnet effect. So he's trying to go back to his normal everyday life, but then this new girl at school comes up to him and begs him to take on her detective case. She's had a heart transplant and she feels like she's getting a weird reaction, like emotional reaction from the heart, and she wants to find out the owner. And you don't have to watch the rest of that episode to figure out that she got the heart transplant from the detective, and the detective's feelings for the main character are coming through her through the heart, and now she's falling for him. To quote Lindsay Ellis, "Thanks, I hate it." In Kageki Shoujo, we watch a group of girls who are joining a prestigious Japanese school to learn the art of takarazuka, a historical Japanese acting art of basically all-girl musical theater troupes. This is the kind of show where I feel like I'm the target audience being marketed towards, but I just couldn't get into it. The girl who seemed like the main character from the first episode is an ex-idol with a traumatic past, and it just leaves her very cold and distant, and that totally makes sense for a character with her traumatic background, but it didn't result in her being a very interesting character. It seemed like she didn't care about being at the school, which meant that I didn't care about her succeeding at getting in. Now, from the second episode, the other main character actually gets a lot more of the screen time, presumably because the writers found her easier to write things about because she actually has a personality. The problem is that I found her personality really grating, and I get that the show was kind of going for this, like, lots of characters are frustrated by her, but the audience will find her very charming, and she's gonna win you over with her positive attitude, but I never got past the annoying part. I really wanted to like her because she was explicitly being represented as, like, a particularly tall character, and I'm a tall woman. You would be surprised, if you sit down and think about it, how little tall women representation there is in media. I kept watching for a while because I respected this show and wanted to like it, even though I wasn't actually enjoying it. Another show I just couldn't seem to get into was Sunny Boy. In this show, a high school and all of the members of one of its classes have become unmoored from reality, and the school is floating through a black void, and they have a weird cat version of Amazon, so they're not going to starve, and some of them have superpowers, and nothing happens. The animation is kind of lovely in an unusual way. It has a really captivating natural flow to it, but it was also a little off-putting, and I just couldn't really get attached to any of the characters or even what was happening. After the first episode, I felt like I should give episode 2 a shot, but then I also procrastinated it for weeks. And when I actually put on the second episode, I got bored and annoyed within like 3 minutes. It reminds me a lot of Lost. I never really got into Lost. I think I watched 3 or 4 episodes of it, and very quickly I was getting annoyed by the way it was just layering on more confusion without ever answering anything. I got the sense early on that it was never going to make sense. And I get the same vibe from this show. I could be wrong. I didn't give it much of a chance. But I think I really have to respect that part of me that was procrastinating and not wanting to watch that next episode. Like, what am I supposed to say? I didn't want to watch more. And we've arrived at the fine section. These shows are perfectly watchable. They just don't have anything really special that pushes them over the edge and makes them into something that I want to broadly recommend. My favorite show of the season is in here. Hey look, an isekai! Tsuki ga Michibuku Isekai Doshu is going more for comedy than anything else, but it's not quite a full parody. Overall, it was just kind of middling, so I ended up dropping it because, again, there wasn't really anything special about it. In fact, I probably watched more of it than I should, but a scene in the first episode got pretty much the biggest laugh of the whole season out of me, so I had a lot of goodwill. Basically, a guy gets isekai'd, but the goddess of the world he's sent to is shamelessly narcissistic, and because he's not attractive, she gives him what she considers the worst power, because she's obligated to give him something, and yeets him out into the wilderness far from any civilization. Now, the guardian god of his own world is a little pissed off about this, so he grants him a bunch of power, so he's really strong. But, yeah, he's stuck out in the middle of nowhere. He ends up befriending some monster girls, and they do stuff. He's mad at the goddess, that's funny. It's fine. Our next show is an isekai that plays it a little bit more straight, Seirei Gensoki. Our main character dies and is reincarnated into a new world. The difference here is that his spirit basically joins a spirit in a boy who already exists, and the boy who already exists really maintains control of everything. So he's still the same like boy growing up in the slums that he already was, except now he has these memories of a foreign place that are really hard for him to deal with and understand why they're happening. And also suddenly he has a bunch of magical powers which help him to climb out of the slums where he's been living. I really liked the first episode. At the end of it, it revealed he was going to school, but the show had such good pacing that I felt like it wasn't just going to turn into a school forever show, which was correct. He was only in school for like 2 episodes. They were a bit meh, but at least it was moving along, and I was like, okay, I'll see where this is going. And then somehow it really, really quickly turned into a harem out of nowhere, and that's not enough on its own to stop watching, but it also is just completely spinning its wheels at that point, so I dropped it. For a different kind of rebirth, we go to Remain. Ostensibly a sports anime, it's really more of a drama show. I watched like 3/4 of the show, and there was 1 water polo match in the whole thing. This is not a complaint. I really liked the characters and the interactions, which is good because that's what the focus of the show was on. I also really want to applaud this show for giving us a black character in the main cast of a sports show, which is not something I've really seen before. This really isn't a shonen. It's a lot more emotional and dramatical and not really about like hype or sport or action. The first episode was really good and got me really invested in the main character and what was happening to him. His personal life is so interesting. If you're like me and you avoid watching opening themes of shows because you think that might be too much spoilers, skip to the next review now. I'm going to give some very mild spoilers, but it's the only way to explain why I dropped. So this show had a twist, and the twist was absolutely great. I was super excited for it. And then 3 minutes after the twist, they do another different twist. A terrible twist that took me from super excited to really pissed off. And I tried to keep watching, and I just was so upset that I couldn't. Apologies to Demonac for having me rant the entire plot of this show to him so that I had someone to talk to explain why I was so mad. Make You Black Company, or Dungeon Black Company, is an isekai comedy about an evil mining company in an isekai. A black company in Japanese is a company that overworks their employees, black being kind of like crunch time. Our main character is living his dream, having worked hard and made smart investments to become incredibly wealthy at a very young age. He's hanging out in his penthouse condo, gloriously naked, enjoying how totally ripped and buff he is. So of course he's isekai'd into a new world where he has nothing and ends up in massive debt and hired by a company where he's really more of an indentured slave than an actual employee. And thus, we follow this man's quest to work hard to scheme his way into a power position so he can be lazy. I like that the main guy isn't standard normal looking Japanese isekai boy. I also like that he's really buff and often ends up nude, which helps to balance it out when the female characters end up in similar situations. Like, at least the fan service is equal opportunity. Not every joke or scenario works, but the show is willing to go there, and we end up in some truly bizarre situations. This is a show that will take chances. I wasn't sure how into it I was after the first episode, but I had a really good time overall. For a much more down-to-earth scenario, Bokutachi no Remake starts with our main character. He dreamed of going to art school, to the point of applying for it, but his practical side won out, and he went to a normal business school, got a normal business degree. He actually did end up working for some video game companies, but they were like the really shitty ones that kept going under. And finding himself newly unemployed and just deeply regretting all of his life choices, he goes to bed one night wondering what would have happened if I'd gone to art school, only to wake up in his own past on the day where he was choosing between which school acceptance he was going to go with. So this time he joins art school. He lives at a communal house full of students, and it turns out all the students he's living with are great creators from his previous life, known as the Platinum Generation, and he couldn't be more excited to be a part of their lives and help them to create their works. Even better, he still has all his memories of being a grown-ass man with excellent problem-solving skills, and it turns out in art school, this is practically a superpower. The animation is really nice, and despite the time travel conceit, it's a really down-to-earth show with some interesting themes and characters. It's solid. I didn't end up with any strong feelings about it, but if it's at all up your alley, give it a shot. Returning to the comedy genre, Jahi-sama wa Kujikanai is a show about the hubris and downfall of the Demon Lords number 2. Jahi was living a spoiled, rich life, where she could strike fear into her subordinates and do whatever she wanted, until a magical girl came and destroyed the magic realm. Now she's stuck on Earth with almost no powers, definitely no money, trying to find time after work to look for magical crystals so she can restore her power and restore the demon realm. I think I made that sound way more like an adventure show than it is. This is a cute slice of life featuring a delusional main character. I was worried at first that it would have too much of a one-joke feel, and it does get really close to that. But there's some character development, and we don't always end up in the same place at the end of the episode as we started. The episodes usually have between 2 and 5 little stories in them, so that helps to keep things moving. It started midway through the season, and it's 20 episodes long, so it's nowhere near finished yet, but I've already gotten quite a few good laughs out of it. It varies wildly. There have been amazing episodes and kind of terrible episodes, but again, it changes segments pretty quickly, so usually if you're watching a kind of segment, you don't have to watch it very long, and the show's going to change to something better soon. Shiroi Suna no Aquatope is a slice-of-life show about cute girls doing cute aquarium things. It has really nice imagery, most of the time. One of our main characters has run away from home after quitting her job as an idol. The other main character is a high school girl who really believes in her family's aquarium, which has been passed down from generation to generation, and wants to keep it running even though it's pretty much on its last legs. This show is set in Okinawa, and I was really, really enjoying the Okinawa vibes. It made it a great show for summer. And even from the first episode, I was really impressed with these small accuracies, like the idol girl buying Tokyo Banana omiyage to bring back to her family before she decides to run away, or the kind of stores in the market area. It was really grounded. I mean, okay, so there is an island spirit who accepts fish heads, and the aquarium might be able to make you hallucinate when it detects that you're depressed, but other than that, it's really realistic and detailed. This is a double-length season, and I'm not sure the show needs it, because it does feel a little bit like it's spinning its wheels at time. I don't understand how they're going to fill all the episodes, but it has a lot of really touching scenes, It's made me cry a few times, and I'm definitely slashing the main characters in my head. What's just about the opposite of a cute slice of life show? A death game show! Okay, Deate Gobyo de Battle, or Battle 5 Seconds After Meeting, isn't actually a death game, although it's definitely trying to make you think it is. A group of people wake up restrained in a strange place, with a master of ceremonies who, as a bonus, is a purple magician cat girl. And she tells them all that they have superpowers and they need to get ready. And they are playing a game for their lives, which takes place in a number of rounds with different rules. This show is called Battle 5 Seconds After Meeting, and it makes a really big deal of this. Like, it puts a 5-second counter on the screen and actually makes you sit there and watch the countdown. But it's really weird because lots of people meet without having to fight, and then there are people who, like, kill other people, but without having the countdown. They pretty much always see each other and have a conversation before the fight, so it's just completely arbitrary. It's just really weird to see a show have a concept like that and not follow through at all. It's not really a death game show, at least not in my expert opinion. To me, a death game show has a finite number of characters in a set location with some incentive to kill. And, you get introduced to characters, but slowly the numbers are dwindling as they continue to get killed off. You don't really get that in this show. In fact, between rounds, they'll change locations, they meet lots of new people, and there are almost no deaths of named characters. This is not to say that I disliked it, it just didn't scratch the death game itch. It was more of like a Death Note Muno Nanana itch. The main character is explicitly a gamer and kind of lacking in morals, so he's more interested in, like, what can I do to outmaneuver and outplay these people, and he has a power that really plays into that, so it's really fun watching his strategy. It does get kind of ridiculous. It gets very like, well, I know that you know that I know that you know that I know. And the finale involved some absolutely dreadful CG for no apparent reason. But it's confirmed for a season 2, and I will be watching. Another show where I have kind of mixed feelings, but intend to watch season 2, Vanitas no Carte. No Carte? Strap in. I take notes for these shows, and usually my notes are like one paragraph. I am so conflicted with this show, I had like 7 paragraphs of notes. This story is set in an alternate universe steampunk Paris. A long time ago, vampires and humans were at war, but that's no longer the case. In fact, the vampires seem to mostly hang out in their own little pocket universe, but even when they are hanging out in the streets with humans, humans aren't really aware that they're there. Unless there's a vampire attack. But they just think that's normal vampires, where the reality is that those vampires are under a mysterious affliction. Vampires are being cursed, and these curse bearers are at risk of going wild. Our main character Vanitas' goal is to save the vampires using this alchemical artifact book he has, where he can actually cure the curse bearers and hopefully stop the curse altogether. He's actually a human, so no one's quite sure how he managed to get a hold of this book, and he's using this book to heal vampires, but this book is legendarily famous among vampires as being what gives them the curse, so most vampires mistrust him and think he's actually the cause of the problem. This show is gorgeous, hello again Studio Bones, and pretty horny. Not so much in an ecchi way, but in a like, everyone is in love with everyone else kind of way. The setting is super strong. Some of you are even more over the school setting than I am, and here we are in a steampunk Paris, and I went on vacation to Paris one time, and watching this show, I would recognize things that I had seen in person, so it was just really cool. This show is not really an action show, although there are some great action scenes. It's also not really a romance show, although there are some romantic scenes. It's not really a comedy show, but it made me laugh more than some other comedy shows. Vanitas is the ultimate shit stirrer. No, I struggled a lot with this show because it's almost more about emotional impacts than about the story. Like, there are definitely things going on, but you're more likely to end up following someone's date than the actual machinations of what's happening in the plot. I wonder if they were like rushing through the manga to try to get to a certain point in the adaptation or something. But ultimately what really kept me interested was Vanitas and the relationship between him and Noe. Noe is more of our audience insert, the one who kind of doesn't know what's going on around the world despite being a vampire. And I like that he finds Vanitas very mysterious as well and wants to learn more about him, because that's also how the audience feels. This show is full of gorgeous, interesting characters, and it feels like they're all into each other. Like, it would be really easy to slash Vanitas and Noe, but it's also really easy to slash Vanitas and John, and it seems like maybe Noe likes John, and then, like, there's Dominique who likes Noe, and when I hang out in bisexual spaces online, we talk about bi culture, and a film that comes up a lot is The Mummy. As you can see from this wonderful meme, my sexual orientation is the cast of The Mummy. I deem Vanitas no Carte to be bisexual culture for much the same reason. One show I'm not conflicted about at all is Otome Game no Hamatsu Flag Shikanai Akuyaku Reijo ni Tensei Shite Shimata X, or My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom X. Welcome back, Baccarina. All hail the queen of the harem. More bisexual culture. In case you missed it when I talked about season 1, in the show our main character gets isekai'd into an otome game, a Japanese romance game where you're the female main character and there are different romanceable characters for you to pursue, like Hatoful Lover. However, she doesn't arrive as the main character, she arrives as the villainess, a character who dies or is exiled in all the storylines. But she arrives long before the events of the game, as a child, and using her foreknowledge of the game, she's able to escape her fate, and in the process make all the romanceable characters fall in love with her. And most of the female characters too. And the heroine. This show is a bi-pan poly dream. You can pretty much slash anybody with Katarina. You can imagine them in multiple configurations. There are multiple female characters explicitly romantically interested in the lead, which is really cool to see. And while maybe less official, I pretty much consider Katarina a sexual representation as well, because despite being surrounded by attractive people who are totally into her, she remains more interested in pastries. This show's main character is so dumb she actually shoots the moon and comes back around to being amazing. In this show, the more ludicrous the situation gets, the better it gets. And while season 1 had to waste time doing pesky things like setting up the characters in the plot, season 2 just goes off to the runnings. And we got set up for season 3! My personal favorite show of the season is Genjitsu Shugi Yusha no Okoku Sai Kenki, or How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. This starts as your standard, the kingdom is in dire need because of like the demon lord, so they summon the hero from another world, isekai. Our hero was studying something, maybe everything in college. When he arrives, he determines that his skills would be better put to use solving the many problems of the kingdom, which include a food shortage and an economic crisis, rather than running off to try and fight the demon empire. I love this show. This show is not good. The animation is totally pedestrian. The pacing is off the wall. You can actually feel the adaptation struggling. They seem to just cut scenes at random. A lot of episodes end on the world's lamest cliffhangers. This is very, very wordy content where they're like talking about the problems and figuring things out and explaining their processes and it does seem like it would just be infinitely better in the original light novel or a manga. The show's very dry. It's plot dump after plot dump, but I loved the world building, and I loved watching the main character solve these problems. Although sometimes it's a little like, wait, no one in this world has figured out, like, supply and demand? What? Also, the show made a really big deal of him recruiting these advisors with, like, their special skill sets, and I was disappointed because they were wildly stereotypical, and then they also had almost nothing to do in the show. Again, I'm sure they had a lot more to do in the story. Like, one of these advisors is like, this is the bureaucrat who will help you get everything done. He knows how to do everything, and he has like 2 scenes in the show, and it was really weird. But I'm sure that he's in the novel constantly, like, being the one they're talking these things through with, but what I do like is that while this show does have a little bit of a harem thing going on, they also explain that in this show, polyamory is normal and perfectly accepted. So the harem are not really fighting with each other. They all want to be his wives together. That's nice. My sarcasm gene is so strong, it sounds like I'm being sarcastic. I'm not. I think it's really cool that, like, the polyamory is just kind of, like, explicitly acceptable. This next section requires a content warning because, due to the content of the show, I have to discuss sexual assault and abuse and gang rape. So, if those kind of things are going to make you sad, you can skip to the next section. Also, I'm really inconsistent with my pronunciation of Ida-ten. It should be Ida-ten, but I definitely say Ida-ten sometimes, so there's that too. Also, there definitely are some minor spoilers for the first few episodes of the series. Yeah, that's a lot. The next show is anything but dry. Heian Sedai no Idan Tachi, the Ida-ten no Only Peace, is a show about some gods called Ida-ten. They protect humanity from demons, but not in an altruistic way. After all, if humanity doesn't suffer, they won't have the emotional capacity to create more Ida-ten. So they don't want humanity to go extinct, but they have no interest in interfering with wars or even preventing war crimes. And actually, the reason they know only peace is because 800 years ago, the Ida-ten defeated and sealed all the demons, leaving one Ida-ten behind to train the new generation. The training is absolutely brutal. It's like Super Saiyans on steroids. They get beaten to a pulp with wounds that would 100% kill a person, but it can't kill a god because they're not made of physical stuff exactly. Now, because the training is so brutal, and because all the demons have been sealed away, a lot of them totally slack on the training. But it's fine. They don't need to know how to fight. It's not like the demons have figured out a way to hybridize with humans, giving them greater intelligence than ever before and allowing them to hide in human society. Definitely not. So, this is another show where I have, like, 10 paragraphs of notes. This is a seinen show, which is kind of like Shonen's older brother. Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Kimetsu no Yaiba, these are all shonen shows. The target audience is like 13-year-old boys. Yes, lots of other people enjoy them. But because that's the target audience, there are limits to how much violence or sexual content that they can show. As a seinen show, it's marketed towards adults, so it can go a lot further with the subject matter. This show has a real candy-colored aesthetic and character models that are a little bit more on the cartoony side, but don't let that aesthetic fool you. That, plus the really cool animation, which is super energetic, are kind of there to take the edge off of some of the violence. I guess I have 2 main things to talk about, which are why I love this show and couldn't stop watching, and will continue watching when season 2 comes out, and why I hate this show, and just couldn't bring myself to put it under the recommended tag, even though in many ways it is truly excellent. I'm going to start with my issues. This show has some really gross and problematic sexual content. It's worth noting that I'm asexual, so I could be particularly sensitive to this type of thing, but I definitely think this show requires some trigger warnings because there is sexual assault and other non-consensual sexual situations. And I don't mean like one time, I mean this happens numerous times over the course of the series. When I was watching the first episode, I was 10 out of 10 hyped, like, oh, this is already the best show of the season, and I'm one episode in. Until the last scene, which is a horrific gang rape scene. This isn't like Goblin Slayer, where it was sexualized. In fact, it was largely off-screen, but it was still shocking. Now, I want you to understand that for a show to keep bringing up these situations that I really dislike and really make me uncomfortable, for me to keep watching that show says how good the rest of the show is. This show is doing some absolutely fascinating things that I don't really see in media, let alone anime. There is little to no moral difference between our antagonists and our protagonists. It's more that they are both supremely powerful groups of beings which are necessarily in conflict with each other. This show has excellent fight scenes, but it's less about the fight scenes and like the shonen ramp up of powers and whatnot, and more a battle of wits, where characters on the opposite sides maneuver against each other, and it goes against some expected tropes. Normally in an action show, the bad guys send some of their weaker members to fight the heroes, and we gradually fight stronger and stronger enemies until we reach the boss. This show does the complete opposite. This show, the bad guys say, holy shit, there are still Ida-ten, we thought they were all gone. Send their strongest member to go kill them before they can get any stronger and get any new members. The Ida-ten kick the living shit out of the strongest demon, and the rest of the demons go into full panic mode like, oh shit, what the fuck do we do now? So the demons, the antagonists, are the weaker underdogs who need to come up with a scheme to defeat the Ida-ten because an upfront battle is clearly not in their favor. So it's this twisting, this flipped upside down plot progression, these totally wild scenarios that come from this opposition to the normal tropes that keeps me watching. It is a really challenging watch for me because it does make me very uncomfortable at times, but there are also so many cool things and ideas that get lodged in my brain. And it was one hell of a cliffhanger at the end of season 1. Hey! You like pirates? Like Pirates of the Caribbean? You like anime? Steampunk? Alternate history? Female characters? Ninjas? Welcome to Kaizoku Ojo, or Fina, Pirate Princess. This is a swashbuckling show starring a plucky young noble lady and her ninja protectors. Her father was killed in front of her when she was young while trying to complete some kind of mission, and now she seeks to also fulfill that mission if she can figure out what it is. I like how Fena is both presented as very beautiful and also allowed to make really expressive, goofy expressions. They lend a vitality to her character that really had me liking her very quickly. We also have just a bunch of women in this show. Her ninja protectors include a female ninja who we get to know, and there's a whole antagonistic ship of pirate ladies with a wide variety of body types we don't often get in anime. It's not exactly the most original plot ever, but it has beautiful animation, and it has fucking ninjas in a steampunk submarine.
What is this? Are you trying to trick me? Is this a kissing book?
Yeah, there's some romance too. Unfortunately, this show started mid-season, so it's not really concluded as of script writing, which means my most highly recommended show, the show of the season and last season, is Fumetsu no Anatae, To Your Eternity. I need to change the picture. Fumetsu no Anatae, To Your Eternity. I'm keeping that take. In case you don't remember from last time, in this show our main character is a mysterious orb created by a mysterious figure shrouded in black. The orb collects information. If it has experience with something, it can reproduce that something. To reproduce a living thing, well, it can't reproduce a living thing. The creature needs to die first before the orb can reproduce it. Before long, the orb ends up encountering a human being, said human being dies, and they gain the ability to take on a human form and slowly learn how to communicate. It gains the name Fushi, which is literally drawn from the Japanese word immortal. This is because they are unkillable under normal circumstances. They just reform if wounded. However, there are some mysterious enemies with the unfortunately goofy name of knockers. If a knocker kills them, they will lose access to whatever form they were just killed in, along with all the memories of that form. They won't be able to transform into that shape again until they defeat the knocker and regain their memories. There are action scenes, and they are amazing, but that is not the focus in this show. This is about the journey. This is about contemplating the meaning of freedom, life, and death. If you become close to Fushi and you die, in one way, you are now immortal, because Fushi will always remember you, unless a knocker steals your memory from them. This show is very effective. If it wants you to hate something, you will seethe. If it wants you to root for someone, you will cheer for them. If it wants you to feel sad, you will cry. In the season finale, I cried so hard, I became nauseous. I thought I was going to puke. I swear to God, I'm trying to praise this show. A warning. If you do not like spoilers, do not watch the OP to this show. Even in the first episode, the OP is just made up of screen captures of all the most important moments of the show. Up through and including the season finale. I cannot believe the things they put in that OP. Oh my god. There is a season 2 planned for fall next year, and I will need to buy more tissues before then. And now it's time for Best Boy. While there were a lot of male characters I liked this season, a lot of them were just variations on, like, standard young Japanese guy with black hair, like standard isekai guy. They were well done examples of the trope, but they weren't really standouts. So let's talk more about my boy Vanitas. Vanitas is like the bard party face with very few morals to him, and he happens to be in possession of an overpowered artifact. He's mercurial and manipulative, and willing to seemingly change his stance or his beliefs on a dime just in order to manipulate people and get the result he wants, which makes it really hard to tell when he's actually being genuine or what he really feels about things. There's this amazing scene where it's set up that he has a horrible past relationship with this character, and he tells the other characters, like, just play along, and he goes in, and he's acting like he cares about this person, and this person is saying shit to him that is just fucking horrific, and he's just rolling with it, like, oh yeah, that's fine, that's normal, to the point where the other kids, preschool teacher shit, to the point where the other characters literally can't handle how upsetting it is on his behalf. But he is so stone cold dedicated to getting the information he's trying to get that he's willing to just play along with this abuser. Ugh. As for best girl, Katarina may be my asexual icon, but the best girl has to be Pyoran from Fumetsu no Anate. I talked about Fina, Pirate Princess, having a wide variety of female characters, but really that's something Fumetsu no Anate has too. There are very few characters that are really presented as sexy or sexual at all. We have female characters that range from young girls to Pyoran, who's an old lady. She's not your typical old lady, though. This is a badass old lady who is probably a murderer. She's very content with her life and perfectly willing to risk anything, including death, for the things she believes in, especially because she's lived a good life already, so if she dies trying to accomplish something, at least she tried. Here she is, beating the shit out of our main character. Yeah! Yeah, you can't tell Pyoran what to do. You tell her she can't do something, she'll chew you out. I also want to give a shout out to my girl Mia. Mia uses fucking chair foo. This girl lives on a prison island. All her friends have real weapons. They have swords, bows and arrow, dart guns, spear, and this bitch walks into the fight with a wooden folding chair. Fucking iconic. It's non-binary highlight time! Yay! A note before I start. I don't think I've ever heard a term like transsexual or non-binary used in anime. The progress of LGBT rights in Japan is just not where things are in the US and in Canada. The good news is there's not a lot of active persecution because people tend to be very live and let live, but that also means that they haven't had an incident like Stonewall to really bring them together and make them fight. In any case, when I'm talking about a character and considering them as non-binary or transsexual non-binary, I am, by necessity, using my opinion of my understanding of these terms and looking at a character through that lens. That does not mean that they are officially that thing. They are a character, so they can't really claim an identity on their own. And Japan has its own history of cross-dressing and gender and sexuality tropes. So this is just my reading of the characters. And I'm definitely risking putting my foot in it when I do this, but I want to highlight any possible representation. So, this is Ranga from Miyakyu Black Company. Ranga hangs out with the girls and gives me a very non-binary femme kind of vibe. When Ranga is introduced, they are presenting as female. Our main character very quickly determines that they have something in their shorts. It's not a great moment, but it's not presented as a gross out moment. And what I do like is that once that's determined, it becomes a non-issue. Ranga joins the party. No one is trying to convince them not to wear dresses or skirts. They seem very happy when people think that they are a girl. In fact, they seem mostly concerned with coming off as cute. I would also like to mention everyone's favorite immortal sphere, Fushi. While they are frequently represented in this form, they also use female forms and don't seem to have any preference between them. They never seem uncomfortable using a female form. Fushi basically uses this form because we associate it with him as the audience. It's really like the show's short form, like you see him and you think, oh yeah, that guy. And it works so well because it was their first human form, and also because we never learned the name of this character. So it's easier to see them as Fushi than if we had learned that boy's name. In fact, that boy is called the Nameless Boy. Well, that's it for the summer season. The fall season is already shaping up to be good. I mean, if nothing else, we have Kimetsu no Yaiba, Kaizoku no Ojo is continuing, and Jahi-sama is continuing, and I've already seen a couple other shows that I'm very excited for. See you next time. Bye-bye. Help me, whale. You're my only hope. Kageki Shoujo is a show... If humans don't suffer, they won't prayer. They won't prayer. In addition, of course, we have a missing image. Cool. Her. Qu'est-ce qui se passe ici? Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.